These days it might be a little too easy to take for granted how accessible multiplayer gaming has become. Back in the day you had to force your little brother to play with that cursed Mad Catz controller with the broken triggers and awful turbo button. The PS2 library boasted plenty of excellent industry-changing games that allowed players to test their mettle against each other, but which are the best? I'm Jimmy for Cultured Vultures. I used to be the Lionel Messi of Pro Evo 4 against my little sister, and these are the best PS2 multiplayer games of all time. Number 10, SSX Tricky. Otherwise known as the games that made your mother look at you funny when you said its name for the first time, EA simply knocked it out of the park with the SSX series. With 4 games on the PS2, each one is a separate take on the sport of snowboarding in its own right, though trying to choose which one is the best out of all of them is pretty difficult. Trust us, we gave it a go. While the later games in the series like SSX3 and SSX On Tour were perfect for the single-player gamer, thanks to their more involved career modes and focus on free roaming gameplay, SSX Tricky's almost straightforwardness makes it perfect for a spot of multiplayer gaming on your PS2. Ostensibly an upgraded version of the first SSX game, SSX Tricky featured 12 characters and a number of tracks, with the gameplay and aesthetic being ramped up to 11. The first game featured racing and tricks, but SSX Tricky finally introduced Uber tricks, the gravity and logic-defying super moves that saw characters breakdancing on a board while it's flying through the air. SSX Tricky might only support 2-player multiplayer, but it still ranks among the best multiplayer games that the PS2 has to offer, especially if you're trying to rock a rhyme that's right on time. Oh, sorry, it's really tricky to not start singing that in your head when you hear it, isn't it? Apparently it's also tricky to make snowboarding games these days. Where are they all? What happened? Number 9, SOCOM 2. While the OG Xbox might have truly driven online console gaming forward with Xbox Live and Halo 2 specifically, the PS2 was no slouch with its online capabilities either, even if the amount of people who took advantage of that was relatively low. A number of PS2 games had online functionality in some form, allowing players to prove their superiority with players across the world instead of the next branch over on the family tree or whoever was in your class at school. From Tony Hawk's to the WWE games, there's plenty to choose from, but one series that helped sell the online aspect of console gaming for PS2 owners in particular was SOCOM, but in particular even more, SOCOM 2. Hell, you know that the online for this game must be iconic when a dedicated team of modders and emulators are keeping a version of every SOCOM PS2 game running to this day. While SOCOM 3 and Combined Assault might have offered new features and mechanics, with CA even including the ability to play through the story mode in online co-op, SOCOM 2 gets the nod from us for being the perfect blend of improvements over the first game while avoiding all the map pack nonsense that plagued later SOCOM titles. And, you know, online gaming as a whole in the mid to late 2000s. Players would be divided into 2 teams of 8, each trying to pursue their objective while eliminating the other team, and SOCOM 2 even included features like voice chat and friends lists to help people play together, which is something that we take for granted now that we have overarching online networks like Xbox Live, PSN, and Steam. Anyway, if you disagree with this being here, 1v1 us on Sandstorm right now, coward. You won't. Number 8, Pro Evolution Soccer 6. We're just as much aware as anyone that making a list of the best PS2 multiplayer games ever made isn't the most original idea in the world, but what some other less sexy and tall lists would have you believe is that FIFA was always better than Pro Evolution Soccer, or as we like to call it, PES. That is a flat-out lie, told by non-believers, of course, as while FIFA had the licenses, Pro Evo's gameplay was, and in some ways is, still unmatched. FIFA's gameplay was filled with canned animations and predictable reactions, while Pro Evo's gameplay physics were much more dynamic and fun to mess around with, rewarding more skillful play and positioning. Between PES 4, 5 and 6, the PS2 version specifically, Konami were on a massive run of critical dominance until they moved to the next console generation and EA finally caught up. For local players, PES 6 included the ability to edit teams and dress them up as various animals, making it both a more fun and funnier football game to play than most arcade football games of the time, while modes like Random Select allowed players to form Frankenstein-like teams from various regions or leagues for that added bit of spice. PES 6 even included online play, with a group feature that allowed players to join together and play against other clubs. In a way, PES 6's groups feature is almost like a precursor to the Pro Clubs feature that was added in FIFA 09, showing how ahead of the curve Konami were with the PES series. It's a shame then that the Xbox 360 version of PES 6 really fumbled out of the gate, and the series never really recovered. eFootball, more like eGads, what the f*** is this? Castello didn't die for this. Number 7. Micro Machines V4. Games like Mario Kart have proved that racing games are a great foundation for multiplayer gaming fun, and while there was a good number of racing games on the PS2, one of the best multiplayer games in general was Micro Machines V4. Instead of splitting 4 players into separate screens, Micro Machines V4 saw players competing to stay on the same screen, with the slowest players, or the ones who decided not to brake on the sharp turn with no barriers you fool, being eliminated when they disappeared from screen. Play continues until someone wins a set amount of points, or the PS2 has to be turned off because someone threatened to throw their controller out of the window. Ain't no party like a Micro Machines party, because a Micro Machines party ends in a domestic disturbance call. Much like Mario Kart and other arcade-style racing game experiences, Micro Machines V4 made sure to throw items in the mix to ensure that someone somewhere will be crying bull poop by the end of a session. While Micro Machines V4 didn't include online play, its local multiplayer vibes are hard to beat, making it a real gem of the PS2 console. Meanwhile, there's indie games like Make Way, which are taking the formula shown in Micro Machines V4 and exposing them to a modern audience. Heck, if you're a big fan of Make Way, Micro Machines V4 even allows players to create their own tracks, allowing you to commit the ultimate act of shithousery by challenging your friends to play tracks only you have built and understand. A win is still a win, guys, remember that. Number 6. Tekken Tag Tournament. We'd be remiss to not include a fighting game on this list of the best PS2 multiplayer games of all time. But the problem with doing that is that there's so many to choose from. Between Soul Calibur 2 and 3, Street Fighter EX 3, Capcom vs SNK 2 and many others, there's a plethora of excellent fighting games available on the PS2. But if you want the best to play with your friends, Tekken Tag Tournament is the best bet. Yeah, granted, Tekken 5 as a Hall of Fame fighting game might be the better game in terms of mechanics and playability, but for casual enjoyers, TTT's huge roster, the ability to play with 4 people via a multi-tap, and its pure pick-up and play potential makes it the perfect pick for any local multiplayer sessions. Who could ever get tired of a Mexican wrestler suplexing a kangaroo, after all? The original Tekken Tag Tournament was a fun, non-canon spin-off for a series that already is pretty damn silly in general. We got the guy in the fireproof pajamas over here. Given how Tekken 3 is one of the highest selling games in the PS1's library, Tekken Tag Tournament was a great way of celebrating the franchise's already stellar history despite its relative infancy. Pretty much everyone who'd been playable at one point in the series already made a return here, making for a roster that's only been really rivaled by the follow-up Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Throw in the silly Tekken Ball bonus mode, which has returned to the series every now and then, and you've got a genuine multiplayer classic on your hands right here. Number 5. Def Jam Fight for New York. Fighting games might have been great for multiplayer, but you know what's even more fun? Wrestling games. The controls are almost always pretty simple, and the large rosters and various match types ensure there's an almost endless amount of fun to be had. The WWE games on PS2, like the SmackDown series or SmackDown vs. Raw, are all incredible takes on sports entertainment, and we really would not blame you if you wanted to slide Here Comes the Pain into this spot instead, and you can do if you want, I'm not going to stop you. While Fire Pro Wrestling Returns is one for the wrestling sickos who love their technical masterpieces. But if you want the best experience for your buck, Def Jam Fight for New York is the game for you. It's an Aki engine game after all, and if you want the best wrestling action out there on the PS2, Def Jam Thuthunur is it. Instead of being based on a wrestling company, the Def Jam series had the brilliant idea of having hip-hop artists wrestle each other, except everyone's moves and finishes feel like a cross between anime and Mortal Kombat. While Def Jam Vendetta was a more straight-laced wrestling game, Fight for New York is scrappier, grimier, and infinitely more fun, combining a brawling edge with that core wrestling gameplay that made it such a success in the first place. Featuring plenty of recognisable artists, along with a few that'll make you go, huh? And a decent selection of match types, Def Jam Fight for New York is the definitive version of a series that we wish would come back someday. Mostly just to stop people from teasing a comeback then doing nothing with it, you tarts. Number 4, Burnout 3 Takedown. Most people generally consider Burnout 3 Takedown to not only be the pinnacle of the series, but one of the best games the PS2 has ever produced, but that success has largely been attributed to its extensive single-player campaign and stellar gameplay. Now, don't get us wrong, of course, those are incredible, but one aspect of Burnout 3's success that doesn't get celebrated as much as it should is its multiplayer capabilities. Not only does it include some classic split-screen racing for anyone who feels like burning rubber against their friends and family, but there was even a slew of online modes available that allowed for racing against the entire world. Much like SOCOM earlier in this list, it speaks volumes to how good the online for Burnout 3 was when people are still trying to play it today. Both the online and offline multiplayer featured a number of modes, with single race being the standard get to the finish first action, while online road rage functions a little bit differently. Instead of trying to wreck every car in sight, online road rage splits the players into teams of 3, with one team trying to survive for a certain amount of time while the other team guns for them. If the racing is a bit too much for some people, Burnout 3 also allowed players to experience the amazing crash mode in multiplayer too. Team Crush and Double Impact are co-op and competitive takes on the mode respectively, while Party Crash was an 8-player mode where players took turns trying to earn their highest score on a level. If you wanted to prove you were the best at driving or crashing with style, Burnout 3 was the place to do it. We will also accept revenge here if you and your friends preferred that. Number 3, Twisted Metal Black. For a long time there, it felt like Twisted Metal would always be a core part of Sony's portfolio, but after an ill-received reboot on the PS3, the brand disappeared for about 10 years until the release of the pretty decent TV show. Still, we haven't had a new game in over a decade, which is a shame as smashing cars together in a post-apocalypse is some of the most fun you could have on the PlayStation. Twisted Metal saw a whopping 4 games released within 5 years on the PS1, though a lot of players and even critics would consider the first PS2 release, Twisted Metal Black, to be the apex of the entire franchise. If you wanted the best multiplayer experience during the first year of the PS2, Twisted Metal Black was the game to buy. Both new and returning characters have come with vehicles armed to the teeth, with 15 selectable characters that boast their own unique abilities. While each character has a story mode complete with cutscenes and an ending, the real meat and potatoes of Twisted Metal Black was its multiplayer mode. Players pick their vehicle and arena and battle until there's only one player left standing. It's simple yet effective, and manages to be incredibly fun even today. While the original release of Twisted Metal Black only offered split-screen multiplayer, there was a free online disc that players could receive by mailing a card that came with the PS2 online adapter, though the Greatest Hits reissue of Black also came bundled with that online disc. Maybe with the success of the TV show, we'll see Samoa Joe playing Sweet Tooth on PS5 in the future. Or maybe not. Also, it's not multiplayer, but this entry has just reminded me how damn good Black was. Oh, what a whipper. Number 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2. What can we say about the classic Star Wars Battlefront games that haven't already been said in the past? Pandemic's work on these incredible shooters has gone down in history among the best in both the Star Wars franchise and across shooters in general. They're so great, in fact, that both EA and DICE couldn't even match up with their rebooted series, and even Aspire's remastered collection of both Battlefront games failed to capture the magic of the originals in that magic, well, it has to work. While the first Battlefront is certainly an accomplished and brilliant multiplayer game, the improvements and additions that Pandemic made to the Battlefront sequel made this a nigh-on essential multiplayer purchase, regardless of whether or not you're a Star Wars fan. Like the original game, Battlefront 2 included a mix of infantry and vehicle-based multiplayer combat across a range of planets from the Star Wars universe, along with a wide variety of classes with different weapons and abilities. However, it was the new additions to the formula that really helped distinguish Battlefront 2 from its predecessor, including heroes as playable characters for the first time. It's weird to think about heroes not being playable in the OG Battlefront, but that just shows you how much the sequel improved on things. Also included was online multiplayer along with the Galactic Conquest mode, which was like Risk but with way more capture the flag, which could be played competitively via split screen. Battlefront 2 is among the best shooters on PS2 and honestly still the best Star Wars game ever for basically everyone here, but Venus Star is better than Star Wars, so the only winner has to be number 1, Time Splitters Future Perfect.
Look sharp, Marines, incoming!
Better help yourself out.
How could the best PS2 multiplayer game be anything other than Time Splitters, honestly? Free Radicals set their stall out from the get-go with the original Time Splitters on PS2, leveraging their experience from working on GoldenEye and Perfect Dark to produce an amazing spiritual successor to those N64 classics. Time Splitters 2 improved on things by adding more maps, modes and weapons, along with System Link on the PS2, which allowed for up to 16 players to play together in a LAN setting, which is great if you had 4 PS2s, 4 multi-taps and 4 copies of Time Splitters 2. Oh, and 15 other friends as well. Do you have 15 friends in total? Let me know down below. I don't know if I do. Maybe like 12? 10? 9? 6? However, Time Splitters Future Perfect added even more content to the multiplayer, including that all-important online play. The game's online mode allowed up to 8 players from across the world to do battle across Future Perfect's 15 maps, with around 150 characters to choose from. Sure, most people, read cowards, ended up choosing one of the monkeys because they're adorable, and definitely not because they're smaller than the rest of the cast. We're onto you. It took us 20 years, but I'm finally onto you, but there's something for everyone here. Like other games on this list though, if you got sick of the same multiplayer maps over and over again, the map maker tools allow players to create their own, whether it be recreations of old GoldenEye maps or some complex labyrinthine series of tunnels that only you can navigate. Yes, my pretties, let the Mole Master bury you to your death. The replay value here is nigh on limitless, and the fact that we can't have another Time Splitters game in 2024 is fake and lame. At least we'll always have the memories, especially now that we can play it on PS5 too. It's the only game the PS5 has. Outro gang, it's me and you together again at last. I was actually sick in my mouth at one point recording this in one of the entries. Can you guess which one it was? Drop your guesses in the comments down below. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you for watching.